Well, it's officially college basketball season, and the Mountaineers have been winning. The West Virginia Mountaineers have been winning, but they still kind of have an identity crisis a little bit. And unfortunately, it doesn't appear we're going to get much figured out or be able to really gauge this team much through the first month or so of the regular season. In fact, almost until the first of the new year. This is another episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and WVSportsNow.com, one of the newest ventures here within the Now family of networks. And I'm your host, Mike Asti. I'm going to let the Corner 3 guys take care of Pitt and the local Pittsburgh college teams. I'm going to jump on that show from time to time, as I did last year, I'm sure. We're coming off the backyard brawl, Pitt and WVU, and Pitt fans, I'll tell you this, we got a lot of you subscribing to this channel, of course. I picked Pitt to win. I picked Pitt to win last year, so I apologize. Apparently, when I pick Pitt, it doesn't happen. Mountaineers get the victory. They get a kind of an emphatic win, and they were able to hold their foul issues under control through the first half. Pitt wasn't able to shoot as well as they maybe would have liked. They weren't really able to get going. The Mountaineers did just enough, even though Culver wasn't really able to dominate as much as he maybe would have liked. And the Mountaineers end up kind of getting a collective victory, hanging on towards the end and getting the win. And then, since then, West Virginia, who already had a victory over Akron, they haven't played as deep of a schedule or as many games, at least, as Pitt has had, or maybe even as hard of a schedule, as the Mountaineers are going to have a pretty favorable schedule all the way until they will play Ohio State right before conference play, with Kansas coming in after that. And the Mountaineers, of course, getting a victory over Northern Colorado as we stand right now. There may be other wins by the time you watch this, because there's mostly Cupcake City coming up here in the next week or so before you eventually get to that Ohio State game after the holiday season gets underway. But the point of this is the Mountaineers are a team that they're going through a bit of an identity crisis, okay? This is a Mountaineer team that has size, has the ability to rebound, but yet they haven't been doing it as efficiently, and we've already seen a moment here where Culver, who they thought was going to be one of those bangers, in Huggins' doghouse, and having that whole issue come to be. Huggins wants to run two bigs but won't force it. I think that's going to be the issue in terms of whether or not this Mountaineer team will get to the NCAA tournament. We'll be able to have those upset victories. We'll be able to flirt with an upset. And there's the Twitter handle there for the new venture, at WV Sports Now on Twitter, WVSportsNow.com, of course. And that's going to be a gauge, as you hear the birdies in the background there, in my home, or my undisclosed location, temporary home studios here. That's going to gauge whether this Mountaineer team is going to make the tournament or not, and could upset a team like Ohio State. Could get a win over Kansas, who they've been able to beat in recent years, and can win other games throughout the conference tournament season in the Big 12, which isn't necessarily murderer's row like the ACC, but it's not going to be easy for a Mountaineer team that's still trying to rebuild. And this is a West Virginia team that has the size, and you'd love, going off Konate last year was the guy that was supposed to get all the boards even a year ago. Bob Huggins loves rebounding. It's very Pat Riley-esque. He wants to rebound. He truly believes that rebounding leads to wins, and if you rebound, you either stop your opponent, minimize their opportunities, and you increase your opportunities with offensive rebounds to get second chance points, and especially when you're a team that isn't that great shooting. Okay, there's not a Kevin Pittsnoggle here. There's not a Deshaun Butler here. There's not a Javon Carter here who can single-handedly take over a game. There's quality players who are still young, trying to find themselves, trying to come together, and to do that and try to maximize the potential for this team that's coming off of a miserable year last year. It's about doing the scrappy work. It's about doing the Bob Huggins style, the rebounding and scraping away with boards. And that could be a reason why you want to play two bigs. That could be a reason why Huggins wants to have a very, very big team. He doesn't have the shooting touch, so why would you want to go small? without the shooting touch. If you have the shooters, okay, go small. Without the shooters, you go big and it makes sense. Problem is, Culver, who he wants to be one of those guys, of course, benched in the first half of the Northern Colorado game, ended up playing really well in the second half when he finally got in there, kind of got you more of what you wanted, but Huggins isn't going to put up with much crap, and that led to that issue there. Okay, Haley there, he's been a roller coaster ride. This is a West Virginia team that I'm not so sure has the horses to do it, and that goes into the point there with Huggins that he wants the two bigs, he wants to run with two bigs, but won't force it. Huggins won't force it, but this is the gauge. If West Virginia can get two bigs on the floor, if they can run a starting five with two bigs on the floor, if the Mountaineers can get that to be effective, if that can be what Bob Huggins wants, and it can actually happen for West Virginia, then they should be able to have some upset wins. They should have a chance against Ohio State, as shocking as that sounds, because trust me, Ohio State, a top 15 team, they're much better. But the Mountaineers have been prone for the upset. And Alan and I talked about on the Backyard Brawl preview show, West Virginia could be sneaky and maybe upset some teams. They even have young players, the kid from Kennedy Catholic, who Pittsburgh fans will know as well, WPIL high school basketball fans. This is a team that can sneak up on some people and can have a dark horse chance at an NCAA tournament, or at least the postseason. Anything else kind of gravy. But it's going to maybe be determined on if they can get those two bigs on the floor. If not, if the Mountaineers cannot get those two bigs on the floor, and Huggins won't force it, of course, then you're looking at a little concerning of a situation. Then you're in a situation where, see, if more of this happens, Culver bench in the first half for Northern Colorado, he then leads to the late game push from our Cody Nesper there at WVSportsNow.com, doing it a lot there for us, which we appreciate since a lot of us are busy with the rest of the network. This channel here, the Steelers coverage, etc. Pittsburgh Sports Now, the mothership. But regardless, if more of that continues, they're not going to have enough upsets, and the schedule could easily go where they run through the early season schedule. They could easily run through the early season schedule for the first month or so. Go to the Ohio State game undefeated. Wouldn't be shocking, but maybe they would have lost a game or two, because I'm never going to bet on the Mountaineers to win out that many games in a row, with this inexperience of a team especially. But say they go in the Ohio State game undefeated, possible. Or at least with not more than one or two losses. Shouldn't be more than two losses for sure with that schedule. But say they even go with one loss, okay? Make this as evergreen as possible of a program. Say that's the case. Then if that's the case, and they've been small, and they've just been able to shoot enough and get the rebounds when they're there, whoever's on the floor for the Mountaineers, then it gets into a situation where I don't think there's going to be that many more wins. Then it gets into, once you get into conference play, where they may very well, and I talked about this with Alan on the Backyard Brawl preview. He asked me, how do you gauge the Mountaineers? I said, and I mean this still, you can't gauge them until almost the first of the year. You can't gauge them until at least that Ohio State game, and even if they don't win, you don't expect them to win. You want to see how competitive they are against the top 15 team. You can't gauge them until Kansas. You can't gauge them until conference play, until that really gets underway. And those games can be losses. The top 15, top 5 team as we stand now, no one's going to expect WVU to get those wins. They're not ranked. But if they would be competitive, they'd be close, if they somehow would upset those teams, that would, of course, show you a lot, or at least how they're playing in those games. And if you have the small lineup of shooters, or you don't get two bigs on the floor, if there's question marks around your bigs for the Mountaineers, you're not going to be able to shoot well enough, and you're not going to get those upsets, not near it. You're going to get blown out in those games. Those teams are going to run up and down the floor on you. They're going to hit their shots, because if Pitt would have hit shots, Pitt would have beat the Mountaineers. Pitt missed some shots when they had the opportunities, much what happened last year, much the same of that game last year. And there's not one guy to take it over like that was Konate's last moment. That's not going to happen again. There's nobody on this Mountaineer team that can do that. Maybe someone will develop, but as I still stand here a week before Thanksgiving, that guy's not there. At least not a guy that Huggins has enough confidence in. Because that's big. At least not a guy that Huggins has enough confidence in. All right. Jermaine Haley, though, I mean, he's the only guy getting to play the full minute. He's the only guy that's getting to go all up and down the court. He's the guy that's getting that pressure put on him to maybe be that guy. 18 points against Northern Colorado. And what a stud of an effort there in the second half by Culver, but it's going to depend on him getting on the court enough and staying on the court enough to make that happen. But to avoid that happening, to avoid more of that, more of the issues with Huggins and getting benched for a half, staying healthy, that's going to be big for the Mountaineers. They can't afford really any injuries. But this is a Mountaineer team that, you look at the rebounding, let's just go through the rebounding there against Northern Colorado, as I'm not going to make this a long one, but a double-double there for Jermaine Haley. That's going to be the chance of being the stud for the Mountaineers, the guy who can get the boards and make up for slop. Nobody else got in double digits. Culver ends up with 5 in the second half. We're seeing 3, 1, 1, 1, 3. That's going to be a collective group, more than, say, it would have been last year, or maybe more than you would like. But if you get the biggest team possible, if that can work, because the way it would work, the biggest team possible for the Mountaineers needs to be a team that can really snag the rebounds, but can also play defense and can hit enough shots. That's what Huggins means when he won't force it. It needs to hit enough shots where it's not just purely rebounding. It can't just be now what Dwight Howard is for the Lakers. He's effective there because he's doing it in spotty minutes, and other players can take over games, LeBron and AD for the Lakers. It cannot just be a rebounding team or just rely on Haley, who's barely getting to 20 points in these games, and there's not one guy that can take things over. He's still not an amazing shooter, despite the 7 for 10 there against Northern Colorado in all those minutes. Try that against Ohio State. Try that against Kansas. Try that against Texas Tech. Try that against Texas. It's just not going to work probably. Even TCU with Jamie Dixon. So the Mountaineers love to get the 2 bigs on the floor, and if they get those 2 bigs on the floor, if they can make that happen, they have a chance to sneak up on some teams. They have a chance to keep winning beyond that first of the year, beyond those critical games before conference play and then getting into conference play, of course. Beyond that statement and that marker of the Ohio State game, that really the first real game they have this year now that the Backyard Brawl is behind them. A lot of mid-majors prior to that. And none of them are guarantees, of course, for a young Mountaineer team that can get ice cold, can get into foul trouble, and that can ruin things. But if the Mountaineers can score enough with those 2 bigs on the floor, if they can play enough defense, and if they can rebound even more effectively than they've been without it just being one guy, without it just falling on Haley's shoulders, then this Mountaineer team should see the postseason. Then this Mountaineer team will get wins going into conference play. Not dominate by any means, probably still lose to Kansas and those top dogs, but sneak up on some other teams, get a respectable season, get into the postseason, and maybe even the NCAA tournament. It all will rely on, though, what happens with the bigs for the Mountaineers, who still kind of have an identity crisis. That's all for this one here, as I wanted to get into basketball season. Alan and I did the Backyard Brawl preview, of course. Did some shows here for WV Sports Now, but mostly through the football season, which now is ending, despite the big win over Kansas State. It's going to be a lack of a postseason year for the Mountaineers as they rebuild there under Neil Brown, a rebuilding as well for the football program. So now it is basketball season. It is basketball SZN here on Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course WV Sports Now. I'm going to give you the Mountaineer coverage as well as I do with the Pittsburgh sports scene here on the channel. And also going to be available there for you, of course, on WVSportsNow.com, which here's some of our recent articles there. A run is how UNC tied the game, and a run is how WVU pulled away. That again there from Cody, kind of wrapping up the Northern Colorado game, the Cancun Challenge, I believe that game's called. Yes, a game in Morgantown, West Virginia, between a West Virginia team and a Colorado team was taking place under the umbrella of the Cancun Challenge. And we had some fun on Twitter with that, as or Alan actually brought up that there should be some Coronas there, at least have some Coronas. Cody couldn't find them there on the coverage. Cheers beers and Corona beers for the Mountaineers on the win, as at least pound some Coronas when you're in Morgantown, West Virginia, against the Colorado team in something called Cancun. Maybe it's just a Cancun state of mind. I don't know. Getting cold out here in Pittsburgh and similar weather there in West Virginia. This is getting hoodie and jacket season, folks. We had snow the other day. This is not in any way a Cancun situation, but I'd love to be in a Cancun state of mind. So maybe that was kind of the idea. I don't know. Regardless, able to get the win to this point, and we had the coverage there, of course, for you on WVSportsNow.com. Also about the Culver benching and more into that and why that occurred. But Culver certainly redeemed himself in that second half, and it'll remain to be seen how the rest of the season goes between the relationship of Bob Huggins and Culver, the relationship of Bob Huggins and Haley, the relationship of Bob Huggins and the rest of the young players, and kind of needing more from the whole group. And if Bob Huggins can get his way, this season could really be successful. This team could really, really be good. If not, and he won't force it, it might be a problem because there's not enough for the small team. There's not enough of shooting touch. They need to do enough to allow those two bigs to be on the floor. Want to make sure to remind you to hit up the family of networks, PittsburghSportsNow.com, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, SteelersNow.com for the Steelers season. Is as crazy as that's been, and I got some shows there on the channel is there for you as well. The recency of the Steelers news just never stops. And WVSportsNow.com. Hit up the mic drop section. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. On Twitter, at WV Sports Now, which I had the graphic there earlier for you on Twitter. Can also make sure to, and this is the kicker, this is my favorite graphic of all, click on the subscribe button below this video here. Click on the subscribe button. Make it easier for us to get the content to you. Subscribe here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. That's going to do it for this one. Here in my temporary, and full disclosure, this may or may not be my grandfather's office, as after my grandmother's passing, we're kind of in the flux of selling his house and moving him out and getting all these memories and everything gone. And yes, this is kind of old school behind me, but I got them Apple products, so I enjoyed the tweet there from U92, WVU colleague of mine, former Pittsburgh media colleague, as he's now in LA, did his thing in Pittsburgh for a while, Daniel Dudley, commenting that it looked like I took my Apple products back in time to the 1970s. Kind of the case, but I'm helping him a little bit here when I'm not at my normal residence, and also this felt like a perfect spot to kind of have my home studios of sorts, as our studios there at Market Square and different studios in general kind of in flux right now. So it made sense, and also allows me to work from home, which isn't bad for us millennials. I'm not gonna mind it, not gonna hate on it, despite the environment behind me. So this is a time machine of sorts for the broadcast, but revolutionary here with the Apple products and the 1970s vibe behind me. Regardless, it's going to be an interesting season no matter what. And Huggins is going to almost threw a graphic up there with him spitting and losing his cool. And he knows the fouls are going to come. So that's also there, that whole article about Huggins' mentality this year on WVSportsNow.com. So again, I'm Mike Asti. Make sure to subscribe here, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Follow us through the family of networks. And I'll close it the way that it was closed after the Cancun Challenge victory. As weird as that sounds for a game that took place in Morgantown, West Virginia. Cheers, Corona beers, and the Mountaineers.